In the gym, there was much noise. Students making their customary fidgeting noises on a cold winter morning. Some sitting cross-legged on the parquet floor, others lounging in the bleachers with their jackets tucked beneath them. In spite of the muttering students, the teachers stood shoulder to shoulder along the walls, nodding to one another. Two doors swung open, and 20-year police veteran Officer Daniel Reyes strode onto the shiny court. The way he moved was as smooth as butter, and his outfit was spotless. A stunning German shepherd named Leo, who had a shiny coat and a white patch that looked like a star on his chest, was walked by him. There was an immediate hush. Someone or something about Leo was a showstopper. His every muscle worked in perfect harmony as he exuded an air of command and dominance. His amber eyes seemed to pick up on every pulse in the audience. K-9 demonstrations were supposed to be commonplace. They had conducted hundreds of them at various schools in the city. The performance, the scent, the work, the acclaim, the questions from the very excited children, nothing out of the ordinary. Except that halfway down the center aisle, Leo stopped silently. All that was heard was an abrupt silence. He cocked his head and his ears pricked up. To anybody familiar with the dog would have been obvious. The leash in Reyes's hand tightened and yanked with a subtle intensity. Leo remained still, while Rehia firmly asserted it. A low, weird noise came out of his throat as his nostrils flared up. Even though it was barely audible, it reeked of desperation and raw emotion. Among the third row of bleachers, a small girl slouched up, her pale complexion adorned with a blue beanie. She seemed so delicate, as if even a little breeze might carry her away. Gripping the metal railing, her fingers clenched tightly, she was clearly terrified. A mix of exhaustion and astonishment showed in her drooping eyes. Their eyes met, and for what felt like an eternity, Leo and her were alone. It took 8 years for a single breath to become two separate ones. Officer Reyes had a shiver down his spine for the very first time during his career. Something was happening that didn't match any of the guidelines. A significant amount of snowfall occurred 8 years ago. Shivering in her thick purple coat, 7-year-old Ella Thompson sat in the back seat of her family's vintage automobile. On their way home after a lengthy winter weekend spent visiting her grandparents, her father David was behind the wheel. Rachel, who had been exhausted from her long days at the hospital and the subtle burden of duty, was sound asleep in the passenger seat. David slammed on the brakes. In the white fog, a pickup truck's brake lights emitted crimson halos as it rested on the shoulder. Something was behind it, and a man was slouched. With her interest piqued, Ella peered out the window. After that, he tossed a burlap bag into a ditch covered in snow. A knot formed in David's jaw. As he began to open his door, he yelled out, "Remain in the car!" However, Ella, being a child, was unyielding and proceeded to follow the sound of whining. The bag contained 6 infant German shepherd pups. Out of the 6, 5 remained still and chilly. With peculiar patterns and an immaculate white star on his breast, he quivered and scarcely breathed. In a whisper, Ella said, "Daddy, he's crying," as she had tears running down her cheeks. Without giving it any thought, she reached into the bag and grabbed the lifeless body. Even though he was little more than a ball of fur and bones, he ceased trembling the second he was placed against her. That evening, David the puppy returned home, and the vet made it clear he was very undernourished and likely the runt of the litter despite Rachel's complaints that they weren't dog people. But Ella was hell-bent. She would whisper to him constantly and set alarms every few hours to give him formula. He appeared to be the only one who could decipher the secret language she spoke with her small voice. She cradled him in her vintage baby blanket and soothed him with melodies whenever he wailed. He curled up in her neck for a good night's sleep. Using his large paws and enthusiastic yips, he was able to pursue her across the backyard by spring. He was given her name. She began to draw Leo all over her bedroom walls, depicting him running, sitting, and resting. He was as faithful as a shadow, and she soon realized that she had saved both of their lives when they rescued him from a drowning disaster that had occurred on a wet day. On a Tuesday afternoon when Ella was 8 years old, she had just returned home after spending the day at a friend's house. Suddenly, a vehicle sped around the corner, its driver oblivious to the little girl crossing the street. The collision altered her life forever, and she underwent a series of operations to repair her left leg, hip, and pelvis. Ella's formerly brilliant eyes grew dark as she lay in her hospital bed, and doctors told her that after putting rods and plates into her back, she would walk again, but with a permanent limp. Recovery would be a lengthy, painful, and unpredictable process. As Rachel pleaded with the hospital to change their policy, Leo was able to enter the room with his tail down and his head tilted in worry, while Rachel's little fists gripped in silent pain as she stared at the ceiling. When Ella yelled out, "I can't do this," he would calmly place his head on the mattress and watch her breath as she waited for her return home. During her excruciating physical therapy sessions, he would once again be her shadow, walking gently behind her and matching her unsteady pace. Leo would wait patiently at the end of the hallway, his tail waving and his eyes silently encouraging her as she took one more step after another. Eventually, she would reach the end of the hallway and feel a shared sense of accomplishment. As she passed out from weariness, Leo's infectious enthusiasm would cause him to hop up and down. He would then encircle her, providing comfort by simply being there. Leon is more than simply a pet. In her interview with the physical therapist, David mentioned that Leo was her reason to try. He reassured her and jolted her up whenever she was in the midst of a terrifying dream, like a little coach with fur and an overly kind heart. He nudged her onward when she paused in the middle of her workout and growled softly. They became closer not because of sweets and trickery, but because of the difficulties they faced together. Even Ella's parents were confused by certain things that Leo grasped. In a world now rife with suffering and confinement, he could sense her emotions before she spoke, and he knew just how close to press against her and just how far away to sit silently. By the time Ella was 9, Leo had brought back memories of her past and the potential she still had. Insurance helped with some of the costs, but it was never enough to alleviate the crushing financial burden that the Thompson family was under. David's woodworking business had taken a major hit during the recession, and commissions dried up, clients were slow to pay, and medical bills from Ella's surgeries and ongoing therapy continued piling up like vines. Despite Rachel working double shifts at the hospital and not always getting home until it was light outside, Leo never left Ella's side. He walked slowly and steadily by her side, supporting her when she needed it most. He also slept next to her on painful nights and silently listened as she whispered worries no one could understand. Eventually, someone came knocking on the door. Along with Officer Daniel Reyes, Police Chief Vernon Hale stunned the room into silence with his firm handshake, sharp eyes, and offer. "We've heard stories about your dog," the chief said, watching Leo closely about how he seems to anticipate needs, understand emotions, and work without training. He nodded toward Ella, saying, "We believe it's because of her." He informed the public that the K-9 unit of the department was expanding. They were in need of canines with high intelligence and emotional intelligence, and Leo was the best they had ever seen. If the government were to foot the bill, the family may get a substantial amount of money, enough to pay off their mortgage, keep the electricity on, cover the cost of physical treatment for one more year, and even save lives. Under his breath, Chief Hale said, "Only with your permission," that night. Rachel and David continued to drink coffee and chat at the kitchen table after Ella had fallen asleep. Like a verdict, the paper sat between them. Leo had transformed them from dog haters to folks who couldn't imagine life without him. "We are stuck," Rachel whimpered. When Ella learned the news the following morning, her scream shocked everyone. As she forcefully pleaded with him, she encircled Leo's neck in an act of profound distress. "He's mine, and he needs me." Beside her, David knelt, his eyes watering. Sometimes the hardest choice is the right one, according to him. "My darling, many others will benefit from Leo. He shouldn't be a hero, in my opinion," she sobbed. "I simply desire for him to belong to me." Ella slept outside of her room that night. Under the cover of blankets and the twinkling stars, she and Leo cuddled up in the fort they had constructed in the backyard. Her voice quivered with anguish as she murmured vows into his fur. "One day, Leo, I will locate you once more. Please remember me." The following morning, when the cruiser approached, Leo drew near it with reluctance, casting a final glance over his shoulder at Ella. Holding his chewed-up tennis ball, she stood on the porch, too heartbroken to wave. Low and seeking and filled with anguish, Leo let out a faint whine as the door closed behind him. The sound resounded through the spring air. Both of them were unable to recall the first year without Leo. Ella felt emptied inside. The once energizing physical therapy sessions were now mechanical and meaningless due to his absence. The girl's new therapist was so frustrated by her lack of effort that she said, "She's not even trying," following therapies. Meaning, not effort was the determining factor. It seems as though nothing mattered without Leo. Her parents saw the change but were unsure of how to fix it. The house had a deserted, peaceful, and lonely air to it. More frequently, David began to sleep at his studio. Rachel ceased hanging framed photographs on the wall. Their mutual silence developed into an unsaid but palpable connection. Ella vanished onto the school grounds. Because of her limp, she was an easy target. In the halls, the kids would mimic her every move and refer to her as the robot girl. She was so good at avoiding eye contact by the time she was in 5th grade. While engrossed in unfinished novels, she devoured her lunch at the library. Nevertheless, she clung to the worn tennis ball which carried a faint scent of Leo, night after night. Under her bed, she preserved it in a shoebox beside a folded blanket, a photograph, and an old chewed-up collar of his. It served as a sanctuary for her, a place of healing and remembrance. Ella silently helped David pack up his belongings as he officially moved out. "It's not forever," she reminded him, restating what he had already told her. They each had a secret knowledge, though. But Leo was off on his own journey, 90 miles away at the State Canine Training Center. His new full-time handler, Officer Reyes, was amazed by how fast Leo improved. Even canines twice his age would be outpaced by Complex's speed. He had exceptional following skills and could locate narcotics and missing persons. Something else, though, stood out. He worked without expecting anything in return. It felt like someone was waiting for him at night, Reyes informed his supervisor. Without facing the door, Leo would not sleep. He would stiffen up physically and emotionally every time it creaked open, just to let himself down in disappointment when it wasn't the person he had hoped for. On occasion during training, he would wander off tail wagging, nose pressed to the ground, as if he had detected a familiar aroma, but no one was ever around. While the rest of the crew dismissed it as an anomaly, Reyes had his doubts. On occasion, at the most peaceful moments, he would observe Leo hunkered down in his kennel, his paws around a weathered fuzzy tennis ball, his sole cherished possession from his past. And in her bedroom, it wouldn't matter how far apart they were, Ella would still do it. Heart after heart, they clung to the same gentle optimism while they waited. Was the other person forgetful? The afternoon in the hospital was just like any other. Ella had been admitted once more. It seemed as though her body wasn't hers after another round of treatments. The once active child now spent much of her time buried under blankets, her skeleton visible through her thinning skin, and her auburn locks shaved down to a wisp behind a delicate blue hat. In her hospital room, the TV softly played another upbeat song to pass the time. The mention of Officer Daniel Reyes almost made her not look up. A courageous police canine was the hero of the narrative. On the screen, a film depicted a German shepherd sprinting over a frozen lake. A youngster tumbled through the gap as the ice gave way under his paws. The canine immediately dove in after him, showing no signs of hesitation. The youngster reached the shore in a matter of minutes, his little fingers clinging to damp fur. The only thing that Ella noticed was the white star on the dog's chest and the way he cocked his head slightly to the left, as he had done before when she had said something to him in the dark. In a low voice, she told her mom, "That's Leo," and straightened up considerably. The insurance paperwork Rachel was filling out was so important that she never even looked up. "My darling, many animals give the impression of saying, 'No?'" Ella's voice was crystal clear, and she followed his image on the screen with her fingertips. He appeared stronger and wider, but she knew it was him. The sensation was like a shock to her chest, and she didn't need confirmation. Red hair characterized the young man featured in the news article. Ella observed that Leo had a peculiar affinity for redheads, which she interpreted as a connection to a long-lost acquaintance. That night, a glimmer of hope returned to her. A small flame, dim but palpable, flickered within her. She hid from prying eyes, gathered all the articles she could find, printed them out, cut them out, and pasted them into a notebook she dubbed Leo's Life. She refrained from disclosing her feelings to anyone, but secretly began to write him letters, subtle, unsent messages, and elaborations on his treatments, loneliness, and the fact that she would never stop loving him. Meanwhile, in a tranquil kennel across the state, Leo stirred more restlessly than usual, as if, on some level, he could feel her presence. It all began at a petrol station adjacent to the city cop. In the middle of the parking lot, while Daniel Reyes was filling up his cruiser, he saw a familiar face. The man was a little older, with slouched shoulders and tired-looking eyes, but Reyes knew him at a glance. Thompson, David. The first set of relatives of Leo. Seeing Reyes caught the man off guard. Stiff nods and courteous remarks were exchanged, but no mention of Leo was made at this point.
Reyes couldn't help but ponder whether the girl had inquired about her dog that night as David strode away. Sitting on his couch, Reyes glanced at the one worn thing placed within the intake note from the day Leo joined the program. The folder had Leo's military records, commendations, photographs, and tracking reports. He couldn't sleep because of this. In the margin, in a thin pencil hand, was Ella's name. He recalled how Leo had always appeared distinct, concentrated, sure and compliant, but yet troubled, as though a piece of himself had been abandoned. Reyes now understood the rationale for his following day's review of medical records. Perhaps it was a minor infraction of etiquette, but he felt it was justifiable. The confirmation was devastating to him. Ella Thompson, a 15-year-old patient in pediatric oncology, is dealing with severe leukemia. Time was running out for the girl who had transformed Leo into a dog, so Reyes did something out of character. He contacted the head of the department. To aid in the treatment of cancer in youngsters, he proposed a trial therapy program including former police dogs. Research demonstrating the advantages of animal-assisted treatment was presented by him to support his claim. Knowing that Leo was nearing retirement age, he contended that Leo could easily transfer into that position if the initiative was authorized. The hail was unlikely. By asking simply, "Are you not doing this for her?" he cut to the chase. Rather of denying it, Reyes stated, "I think she saved him once. According to Hale, maybe now he can return the favor." Time passed at a snail's pace due to bureaucracy, so Reyes sought out David's help. Halfway between the police station and David's workplace was a peaceful cafe where they met. The discussion was brief, intense, and sentimental. David conceded, his voice quivering, that she is deteriorating. But when she saw him on the news, it was like something came alive in her again. They devised an ingenious scheme. The next week, during a school assembly, they would showcase their canines. No one would doubt Leo's presence if Ella could go. Despite their usual policy of not informing Rachel of what to anticipate, David managed to convince her to go for a few hours. It would be an unforgettable moment if it came to fruition. If it didn't, then that idea was left unfinished. Across the table, two men clasped hands. They had both experienced failure, but now they were resolute in their determination to not let it happen again. David conduct 1-6 minutes to use the David experience of campers throughout the town. The morning of the school assembly came and Ella lay in bed, staring at a photo of Leo's chest that she had taped to her headboard. Little did she know that, little by little, hope was being built for her. The sunlight glinted off the frost-covered sidewalks, and inside the Thompson home there was a quiet hum of energy that Ella hadn't felt in months. Ella stood before her mirror, dressed in real clothes for the first time in weeks, her pale face framed by a blue beanie. "Are you sure about this?" she said with a hint of uncertainty as her legs quivered slightly from the exertion. Rachel, her face contorted with fear, whispered a query from the threshold. In a nod, Ella proclaimed, "I need this, Mom, just for today." As long as she remained hidden in the crowd and departed whenever she became fatigued, Rachel agreed to wear her mask. Officer Reyes and Leo the dog, who was behaving strangely, pawing about and perking up at every sound, were there early, and they waited outside the gym. "You know something's different, don't you?" Reyes said to his teammate. "Hang in there, buddy," as he placed a hand on his back. Ella perused the gymnasium from her seat in the third row of the bleachers. Unaware that anything out of the ordinary was going to transpire, the children within were chatting and giggling. Although her heart was pounding, she remained still. Something within her was pulling her taut, but she had no idea what it was. On his way to the microphone, the principal approached. "Officer Leo, a canine, and Officer Reyes are both present today. They were involved in last year's spectacular rescue, so many of you might remember them."
The gym was filled with shouts as Reyes guided Leo down the center aisle. Then, in the midst of the aisle, Leo came to a sudden stop, his tail going limp. His ears perked up, and the leash on Reyes's hand became tense. He yelled out, "Leo!" on his part. "Darboy," she whispered. No one else knew the name. It was hers alone. It was what she'd called him during bedtime stories and secrets referencing the white star on his chest. Reyes said instinctively, but Leo didn't move. Instead, he turned his head slowly and deliberately toward the bleachers, toward Ella. Ella's breath caught in her throat as time collapsed, and the air between them felt charged and electric. With a fierce and unstoppable energy, Leo lunged at the students in the gym. His leash slipped from Reyes's hand, and the dog slithered between them, his intense gaze fixed on his girlfriend. Gasps resounded throughout the gym as teachers rushed to intervene, but Reyes held up a hand and said, his voice heavy with emotion, "Let him go. He's found her." Ella fell to her knees, her tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "You came back." Leo then did something no one in the gym had seen him do in 8 years. He raised his right paw slowly and gently placed it in her open hand, a gesture of trust and recognition of home. The entire gym went silent, as even the skeptical principal blinked back tears as they stood in the bleachers. Standing there with her palm over her lips, Rachel finally understood the gravity of the situation. As he emerged from the back of the room, David felt a mixture of remorse and appreciation as he saw the events unfold. No one budged because they were all in on the secret that this wasn't your average reunion. It was the homecoming of a canine and a female. Chief Hale and the hospital board worked together to start making changes in the weeks that followed. As of right now, Leo is no longer serving as a canine police. He is working part-time as a licensed therapy dog at Riverside Children's Hospital. Whether it was through therapy, sleepless nights, early mornings, or periods of silence when words were too heavy, he returned to being Ella's constant companion. As Ella's energy levels rose and her blood count evened out, she started to recover. Amidst the physician's continued use of terms like cautious and guarded, Rachel was able to focus on what was important: her daughter's smiles, laughter, and life. With Leo's tail as its driving force, the city sponsored a therapy dog pilot program. More former canines became involved, and further children discovered hope. Although he now split his time between patrol and the hospital, Reyes was still Leo's supervisor. It was a moment he will never forget. Certain bonds endure beyond the constraints of time, location, and training, as Leo raced to prove to Ella. With Leo at her side, Ella once again took shaky but distinctive steps. It was worth the 8 years they'd lost to have each other.